Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining my talk. I'm Pardis Emaminaini, a postdoctoral scholar at University of Washington. Today, I'm going to talk about our project to identify how privacy and security factors impact IoT consumers' risk perception and willingness to purchase. This work has been conducted while I was doing my PhD at Carnegie Mellon University, and it's a joint work with my colleagues, Jonard, Yuvraj, and Lori at CMU. Many of us have the experience of purchasing a smart device for ourselves or others. Now, I want you to remember the time when you were in the physical store or searched online for the smart device to buy. You probably saw the information on the price of the device or its technical specification. For example, its size or internet connectivity. But do you remember seeing any information about the privacy or security practices of the device at the time of purchase? The answer is probably no, because usually that information is nowhere to be found. When purchasing a smart device online or in a store, consumers are not able to make an informed purchase decision, as the information on the security and privacy behavior of the smart devices is not readily available to them. To help inform consumers' purchase decision-making process, we designed an IoT privacy and security label somewhat similar to nutrition labels for food items. We talked about the details of this label in our paper at Oakland 2020. Our label has two layers, a primary layer and a secondary layer that can be accessed through the primary layer by either scanning the QR code or typing in the URL. We designed this label mainly based on inputs from a diverse sample of privacy and security experts from academia, industry, government, and NGOs. From the literature, however, we know that experts' understanding could be different from consumers. It is important that the label conveys risk to consumers accurately and potentially impacts their willingness to purchase the smart device. To assess this, we conducted a large-scale online study, which I will focus on for the rest of this talk. Past research has shown that the perceived risk and willingness to purchase are comparable to the actual risk and actual purchase behavior. Some of the factors that have been identified to impact the risk perception are the target of the risk, level of familiarity with the technology, and attitudes and concerns. And some of the factors that could potentially influence purchase behavior are price, brand, usability, word of mouth, and privacy. Among other factors, we explored how the content of our design label conveys risk to consumers and influences their willingness to purchase the smart device. In our survey, we asked participants to imagine purchasing a smart device with a privacy and security label. The label talked about only one privacy or security attribute value. Each participant was assigned to answer questions related to three purchase scenarios. This is an example of a scenario that we presented to participants. The words inside the brackets are the factors that we varied in the scenarios. Imagine you are making a decision to purchase a smart speaker with voice assistant for yourself. This device has a microphone that will listen and respond to your voice commands. The price of the device is within your budget, and the features are all what you would expect from a smart speaker with voice assistant. On the package of the device, there is a label that indicates the following privacy and security practice: purpose of data collection, tailored advertising, and monetization. At the end of each scenario, we ask participants to specify on a larger scale how each attribute value per would change their risk perception and willingness to purchase, and why. At the beginning of my talk, I showed you the label that we previously designed based on inputs from experts. Our design label has 47 pieces of information, which is clearly too many to include in this study. Therefore, we selected a subset of these factors to assess. Specifically, we consider the privacy or security attributes which did not have a hyperlink on the label. And what do I mean by that? For example, in the security mechanism section, there were some attributes that had URL as their value. For example, hardware safety. As these attributes did not have concrete values, we did not include them in our study. But there were some other attributes which could take specific values. For example, security updates, which could have values such as automatic, manual, or consent-based. In this study, we quantified the impact of these type of attributes on risk perception and willingness to purchase. For each attribute, we selected two values, which we hypothesized to be the most protective and the least protective. For example, for the purpose of data collection, we used providing main device functions as the most protective value and monetization as the least protective value. We hypothesized that the most protective values of attributes should significantly decrease the perceived risk and increase the willingness to purchase. We expected the opposite for the least protective values. We designed a mix between subjects and within subjects survey on Amazon Mechanical Turk. We had 6 experimental conditions based on 2 between subject factor of device type, a recipient of the device. We tested 2 types of devices, smart speaker and smart light bulb. We also considered 3 levels for the recipient of the device: purchasing the device for yourself, gifting to a family member, or gifting to a friend. The within subject factor was the privacy and security information. We randomly assigned each participant to answer questions about 3 out of 33 privacy and security attribute value pairs. Our regression analysis showed that participants perceived a significantly higher risk for the smart speaker compared to the smart light bulb. And they were significantly less willing to purchase a smart speaker compared to the smart light bulb. As I previously mentioned, we considered 3 levels for the recipient of the device. And our analysis showed that the device recipient was not a significant factor to describe the risk perception. However, participants were significantly less inclined to purchase the smart device for their friends compared to buying the device for themselves. We qualitatively coded the open-ended responses to explain this behavior. We found that participants frequently mentioned that friends should decide for themselves if they want to have a device with specific privacy and security behaviors. The statistical models indicated that the impact of almost all tested privacy and security attribute values on risk perception and willingness to purchase were as we hypothesized, meaning our hypothesized most protective values significantly decreased the perceived risk and increased the willingness to purchase, and the least protective values significantly increased the risk perception and decreased participants' desire to purchase a smart device. There were a few exceptions, though. The open-ended explanations help us identify several reasons as to why some participants' attitudes toward risk perception and willingness to purchase were different from what we hypothesized. Starting with the average time to patch. Based on the UL guidelines in our study, we selected the most protective value for this attribute to be 1 month and the least protective value to be 6 months. In our models, both values significantly increased the perceived risk and decreased the willingness to purchase. This is the jitter plot for the average time to patch. The x-axis indicates the impact of the attribute value on risk perception, and the y-axis shows their impact on willingness to purchase. The blue points represent the most protective value, in this case 1 month, and the red dots represent the least protective value, which here is 6 months. And as you can see, most of the blue and red points are clustered in the bottom right, showing an increase in risk perception and decrease in willingness to purchase. As a best practice, manufacturers should patch the vulnerabilities in the shortest time, but sometimes, depending on various factors, it could take longer to issue a patch. Our findings suggest that the manufacturers need to provide consumers with justifications as why it takes them a specific amount of time to patch the vulnerability and why it might not be practical to patch the vulnerabilities faster. Purpose of data collection was another factor that did not change some participants' risk perception and willingness to purchase as we expected. Although we hypothesized that providing data for device functionality should decrease the perceived risk, that was true for only 12% of participants. Other participants stated that this information would not impact the risk perception or would even increase the risk, mostly due to their lack of trust in manufacturers. A participant mentioned the companies who collect data are incredibly untrustworthy. They do not have consumers' best interests in mind when they are utilizing the data they collect. We also noticed a few privacy and security misconceptions. For example, some participants thought that no security updates indicate better security, as the device does not need to be updated. A participant said, if there are no updates, then the system must be providing maximum security already. Or, if it says that there's no update, that means that it is already up to date. All known security issues have been currently solved. Another misconception was related to mentioning the average time to patch. Some participants believed that even mentioning the word patch indicates that the device is not secure as it needs to be patched. A participant said, on the label, it advertises that patches are even needed. That is why there is a perception of decreased privacy, or the fact that there was a security vulnerability that had to be fixed would cause me to forego purchasing the device for a family member, regardless of how recently the fix was applied. These themes suggest that being transparent about privacy and security practices is not enough. Our qualitative responses suggest that specific pieces of information consumers would like to see to make more informed decisions. Based on these findings, manufacturers should provide consumers with a justification as to why they implemented specific privacy and security practices. In what ways a specific practice could protect or harm the consumers, what controls consumers have related to each privacy and security practice, and if an option is being offered to control a specific practice, what steps users need to take to enable that option. It is important to mention that while this additional information could potentially mitigate consumers' uncertainty, too much information could overwhelm the consumers. To prevent this, we propose adding this additional information in the expanded view of the label, which could be accessed through the second layer by clicking on the plus sign that is placed in front of each attribute. To recap, we explored the efficacy of our previously designed IoT privacy and security label in conveying risk to consumers and influencing their willingness to purchase. To do so, we assessed the impact of a subset of label privacy and security factors and conducted a large-scale online study. We found that in most cases, the label was effective to change consumers' risk perception and inform their willingness to purchase. However, we found a few exceptions. By qualitatively coding the open-ended responses, we surfaced participants' privacy and security misconceptions that impacted their risk perception and willingness to purchase. Based on our findings, to further inform consumers, we proposed adding some additional information to the label. In this study, we looked into the impact of a subset of label privacy and security factors when being presented as a single piece of information. The next step would be to test the effectiveness of the complete label in realistic purchase settings. If you want to get more information on our label project and see how you can help with this effort, please visit iotsecurityprivacy.org. I'm Pardis Emami Naimi, and thank you very much for your attention.